Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The philosophical landscape of the latter half of the 20th century witnessed a seismic shift, a fracturing of established intellectual edifices. Amidst this upheaval, the work of Gilles Deleuze emerged as a particularly potent force, challenging conventional modes of thought and forging new pathways for understanding the complexities of existence. His intellectual journey, often undertaken in collaboration with Félix Guattari, began with a radical critique of psychoanalysis and a bold reimagining of the unconscious. This initial foray laid the groundwork for a philosophical project that would span diverse fields, from art and literature to politics and cinema, forever altering the contours of contemporary thought. Deleuze's early work with Guattari, most notably their groundbreaking Anti-Oedipus Capitalism and Schizophrenia, constituted a frontal assault on the orthodoxies of Freudian psychoanalysis. Traditional psychoanalytic theory, with its emphasis on the Oedipal complex and the family structure, was deemed inadequate to grasp the multifaceted nature of desire and its intricate connections to social and political forces. They saw psychoanalysis as imposing a rigid, hierarchical framework onto the unconscious, thereby stifling its inherent creativity and productive potential. The intellectual climate in France at this time was characterized by a widespread rejection of grand narratives and fixed structures. Post-structuralism, with its emphasis on deconstruction, difference, and the instability of meaning, had gained considerable traction, questioning the very foundations of Western thought. Thinkers such as Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida had already begun to dismantle traditional notions of power, knowledge, and identity, paving the way for new modes of inquiry. Deleuze and Guattari, deeply influenced by this intellectual milieu, sought to extend its critique to the realm of the unconscious. The central problem Deleuze and Guattari addressed revolved around the perceived limitations of traditional psychoanalytic theory in its capacity to fully comprehend the intricacies of desire and social production. They argued that the Oedipal framework, with its focus on familial relationships and repressed desires, failed to account for the broader social and political forces that shape the unconscious. Traditional psychoanalysis, in their view, tended to individualize and internalize psychic processes, overlooking the ways in which desire is always already embedded in social relations. Their proposed solution was a radical departure from psychoanalytic orthodoxy schizoanalysis. Schizoanalysis offered a method for decoding the unconscious, understanding its connection to social and political forces, and unleashing its productive potential. This approach involved a rejection of the Oedipal complex as the primary organizing principle of the unconscious. Instead, they posited the concept of the body without organs, a notion borrowed from Antonin or Tord, to represent the unorganized, pre-Oedipal state of the unconscious, a realm of pure potentiality and desire. Schizoanalysis sought to map the flows of desire that traverse the social field, tracing their connections to various social institutions, economic structures, and political power dynamics. It aimed to identify the ways in which desire is captured, coded, and territorialized by these forces, thereby limiting its creative and transformative capacities. The goal, then, was to liberate desire from these constraints, allowing it to flow freely and create new connections, new possibilities. One particularly compelling example of their approach is their analysis of capitalism as a deterritorializing force. They argued that capitalism, with its relentless drive for profit and expansion, constantly disrupts established social structures and traditional modes of production. This process of deterritorialization, however, is accompanied by a parallel process of reterritorialization in which new forms of social organization and control are established. Capitalism, in their view, produces flows of desire that are both liberating and oppressive, constantly creating new possibilities, while simultaneously imposing new forms of constraint. Deleuze's intellectual trajectory was profoundly shaped by the philosophies of Baruch Spinoza and Friedrich Nietzsche. Spinoza's philosophy of immanence, with its emphasis on the unity of substance and the rejection of transcendent entities, provided a crucial foundation for Deleuze's own thinking. Spinoza's concept of conatus, the inherent striving of each being to persevere in its own existence, resonated deeply with Deleuze's understanding of desire as a productive force. Nietzsche's critique of morality, with its emphasis on the will to power and the affirmation of life, also exerted a considerable influence on Deleuze. Nietzsche's rejection of traditional moral values and his call for a revaluation of all values provided a powerful impetus for Deleuze's own critique of established social and political norms. Deleuze, like Nietzsche, sought to uncover the hidden forces that shape our thoughts, desires, and actions, challenging us to question the very foundations of our beliefs. A key element of Deleuze's philosophical framework is the concept of assemblages, which will be further expanded upon subsequently. At its core, The concept of assemblages provides a way of thinking about the world as composed of heterogeneous elements that come together to form temporary, dynamic configurations. These elements can be material, social, linguistic, or any combination thereof. The stability of an assemblage depends on the relations of exteriority between its elements, meaning that each element retains its own distinct identity while also contributing to the overall functioning of the assemblage. Deleuze's intellectual trajectory, significantly shaped by thinkers like Nietzsche, led him to develop innovative concepts for understanding the complexities of the world. A key element of Deleuze's philosophical framework is the concept of assemblages. At its core, the concept of assemblages provides a way of thinking about the world as composed of heterogeneous elements that come together to form temporary, dynamic configurations. These elements can be material, social, linguistic, or any combination thereof. The stability of an assemblage depends on the relations of exteriority between its elements, meaning that each element retains its own distinct identity while also contributing to the overall functioning of the assemblage. Deleuze grappled with the challenge of comprehending complex systems without resorting to fixed structures or essential identities. He sought a way to account for the emergent properties and dynamic behaviors that characterize these systems. His solution lay in the concept of assemblages, which emphasizes the relationships between elements and the processes of becoming. Assemblages are understood as fluid and adaptable entities, constantly undergoing processes of deterritorialization and reterritorialization. Deterritorialization refers to the process by which elements become detached from their original contexts and meanings, while reterritorialization involves the reattachment of these elements to new contexts and the formation of new meanings. This constant flux allows assemblages to adapt to changing circumstances and generate novel forms of organization. To better grasp the concept, consider the example of a social movement. A social movement can be viewed as an assemblage of individuals, ideas, resources, and strategies. They coalesce around a common goal. The individuals involved may come from diverse backgrounds and hold varying beliefs, but they are united by a shared desire for social change. The ideas that inform the movement may draw on a range of intellectual traditions, while the resources available to the movement may include financial support, media attention, and grassroots activism. The strategies employed by the movement may involve protests, lobbying, and community organizing. The assemblage is stabilized through the relations between these elements. For example, the effectiveness of a protest may depend on the number of participants, the clarity of the message, and the response from authorities. The success of a lobbying effort may depend on the strength of the arguments presented, the relationships with policymakers, and the political climate. The vitality of community organizing may depend on the engagement of local residents, the availability of resources, and the ability to build coalitions with other groups. The social movement assemblage is not a fixed structure, but is constantly evolving as it adapts to changing circumstances. It may experience periods of growth and decline, shifts in focus and strategy, and internal conflicts and alliances. Another example of an assemblage can be found in technological systems. Consider the Internet as an assemblage of hardware, software, protocol, and users. The hardware includes servers, routers, and personal computers, while the software includes operating systems, web browsers, and applications. The protocols govern the transmission of data across the network, and the users generate and consume content. The Internet assemblage is stabilized through the relations between these elements. For example, the speed and reliability of the network depend on the performance of the hardware and software, the efficiency of the protocols, and the capacity of the infrastructure. The accessibility of content depends on the design of websites and applications, the availability of bandwidth, and the policies of Internet service providers. The security of the network depends on the robustness of the security protocols, the vigilance of users, and the efforts of cybersecurity professionals. The Internet assemblage is constantly evolving as new technologies emerge, user behaviors change, and security threats evolve. Ecosystems also embody the characteristics of assemblages. An ecosystem is an assemblage of living organisms, physical environments, and ecological processes. The living organisms include plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms, while the physical environment includes soil, water, air, and sunlight. The ecological processes include nutrient cycling, energy flow, and species interactions. The ecosystem assemblage is stabilized through the relations between these elements. For example, the productivity of a forest may depend on the availability of sunlight and water, the fertility of the soil, and the diversity of plant species. The stability of a food web may depend on the abundance of prey and predators, the resilience of keystone species, and the integrity of habitats. The resistance of an ecosystem to disturbance may depend on the diversity of species, the complexity of interactions, and the capacity for adaptation. The ecosystem assemblages constantly evolving as species migrate, climate changes, and human activities alter the environment. Deleuze and Guattari's analysis of the state provides a tangible example of the application of assemblages to understanding power relations. They argue that the state is an assemblage of institutions, laws, policies, and practices that exert control over a population. The state is not a monolithic entity, but a complex and dynamic network of power relations that are constantly being negotiated and contested. The state assemblage is stabilized through the relations between these elements. For example, the legitimacy of the state may depend on the consent of the governed, the effectiveness of its policies, and the fairness of its legal system. The power of the state may depend on its control over resources, its ability to enforce laws, and its capacity to mobilize force. The resilience of the state may depend on its ability to adapt to changing circumstances, its capacity to manage crises, and its legitimacy in the eyes of the international community. The state assemblage is constantly evolving. As new challenges arise, power shifts and resistance movements emerge. The concept of assemblages has found widespread use in various disciplines, including social sciences, urban studies, and environmental studies. In social sciences, assemblages are used to analyze social movements, political institutions, and cultural practices. In urban studies, assemblages are used to understand the complex dynamics of cities, including the interactions between people, infrastructure, and the built environment. In environmental studies, assemblages are used to analyze ecosystems, environmental policies, and human-environment interactions. Manuel Delander's work on complexity theory and urbanism provides a compelling example of the influence of Deleuze's concept of assemblages. Delander applies the concept to understand the emergent properties of cities, arguing that cities are complex systems that arise from the interactions of numerous heterogeneous elements. He emphasizes the role of self-organization and bottom-up processes in shaping urban form and function. He sees cities not as planned or designed entities, but as emergent phenomena that arise from the interactions of individuals, businesses, and institutions. Mitchell Foucault's work on power relations provided a significant influence on Deleuze's concept of assemblages. Foucault's analysis of power as a dispersed and relational phenomenon rather than a centralized and hierarchical force resonated with Deleuze's emphasis on the relations of exteriority between elements in an assemblage. Foucault's concept of governmentality, which refers to the ways in which populations are governed through various techniques and practices, also informed Deleuze's understanding of the state as an assemblage of power relations. Deleuze extended Foucault's analysis by emphasizing the dynamic and fluid nature of power relations, highlighting the processes of deterritorialization and reterritorialization that constantly reshape assemblages. Following his exploration of societal structures and power dynamics, Gilles Deleuze turned his philosophical lens toward the realm of cinema, a medium he saw as holding profound potential for thought and perception. This investigation culminated in his two-volume work, Cinema 1, the Movement Image, and Cinema 2, the Time Image, where he undertook a rigorous philosophical analysis of cinematic language. Deleuze's central project in these works was to establish cinema as a legitimate form of philosophical inquiry, one capable of generating its own unique concepts and modes of thinking. He sought to move beyond the traditional view of cinema as merely a representational art form, instead arguing that it could offer novel ways of understanding time, movement, and reality itself. His approach was deeply influenced by the philosophy of Hemi Bergson, whose ideas on duration and the nature of time provided a crucial foundation for Deleuze's cinematic theory. Bergson's concept of duration, which emphasizes the continuous flow and qualitative heterogeneity of time, resonated strongly with Deleuze's attempt to capture the unique temporal experiences offered by cinema. Deleuze's classification of cinema into the categories of the movement image and the time image represents a fundamental distinction in his theory. The movement image, characteristic of classical cinema, is defined by its reliance on the sensory motor schema, where perception leads to action in a linear and causal manner. In this type of cinema, images are organized according to a logic of cause and effect, reflecting a world where actions are determined by identifiable motives and goals. The movement image thus presents a coherent and navigable world, where characters move through space and time in a predictable fashion. In contrast, the time image, which emerged with the advent of modern cinema, disrupts the sensory motor schema and presents a more fragmented and ambiguous experience of time. In the time image, the linear flow of causality is broken, and images are no longer tied to specific actions or outcomes. Instead, the time image explores the complexities of memory, dreams, and subjective experience, often presenting multiple perspectives and temporalities simultaneously. This type of cinema challenges the viewer to actively engage with the film, piecing together meaning from disparate fragments and embracing the inherent ambiguity of the cinematic experience. Deleuze's analysis of Alfred Hitchcock's films provides a compelling example of his approach. to the movement image. Hitchcock's mastery of suspense and narrative structure, Deleuze argues, relies on the careful manipulation of the sensory-motor schema. In films such as Rear Window and Vertigo, the protagonist's perception of events leads directly to action, driving the plot forward in a clear and logical manner. The viewer is drawn into the protagonist's perspective, experiencing the world through their senses and sharing their sense of urgency and uncertainty. Hitchcock's films thus exemplify the classical model of the movement image, where perception and action are tightly intertwined. Orson Welles' films, on the other hand, offer a more complex and ambiguous cinematic experience, one that anticipates the emergence of the time image. In Citizen Kane, for example, the narrative unfolds through multiple perspectives and temporalities, challenging the viewer to piece together the truth about Kane's life from a series of fragmented memories and recollections. The film's innovative use of flashbacks and subjective viewpoints disrupts the linear flow of time, creating a sense of disorientation and uncertainty. Welles's films thus represent a transitional moment in the history of cinema, where the boundaries between the movement image and the time image begin to blur. Jean-Luc Godard's films exemplify the radical experimentation and formal innovation that characterize the time image. In films such as Breathless and Pierrot Le Fou, Godard deliberately breaks with the conventions of classical cinema, disrupting the sensory-motor schema and challenging the viewer's expectations. His films often feature abrupt cuts, jump cuts, and unconventional camera angles, creating a sense of fragmentation and discontinuity. Godard's films also explore the complexities of memory, history, and political ideology, often presenting multiple perspectives and challenging the viewer to critically engage with the film's themes. His work represents a decisive break with the classical model of the movement image, embracing the ambiguity and open-endedness of the time image. Deleuze's work on cinema has had a profound and lasting impact on film studies and media theory. His concepts of the movement image and the time image have provided a valuable framework for understanding the evolution of cinematic language and the diverse range of aesthetic and philosophical possibilities offered by the medium. Film theorists such as Laura Mulvey have drawn on Deleuze's ideas to analyze the representation of gender and sexuality in cinema, while David Bordwell has engaged with Deleuze's work in his own studies of film style and narrative structure. Deleuze's influence extends beyond the field of film studies, informing broader discussions of media, technology, and culture. His emphasis on the dynamic and fluid nature of images resonates with contemporary concerns about the proliferation of digital media and the increasing blurring of boundaries between reality and virtuality. His work encourages a critical and creative engagement with the moving image, urging viewers to embrace the ambiguity and open-endedness of the cinematic experience. The importance of Berson's philosophy to Deleuze's cinematic theory cannot be overstated. Berson's concept of duration, which emphasizes the continuous flow and qualitative heterogeneity of time, provided a crucial foundation for Deleuze's attempt to capture the unique temporal experiences offered by cinema. Berson's ideas on memory, perception, and the nature of consciousness also informed Deleuze's analysis of the time image, which explores the complexities of subjective experience and the fragmentation of temporal experience. Deleuze's engagement with Berson's philosophy represents a significant contribution to the history of ideas, demonstrating the enduring relevance of Berson's thought for understanding contemporary issues in media, art, and culture. In addition to influencing film theorists such as Mulvey and Bordwell, Deleuze's work on cinema has also had a significant impact on filmmakers and artists. His ideas have inspired experimental filmmakers to explore new forms of cinematic expression, pushing the boundaries of the medium and challenging traditional notions of narrative and representation. Artists working in digital media have also drawn on Deleuze's concepts to create immersive and interactive experiences that blur the boundaries between the real and the virtual. Deleuze's work on cinema thus represents a powerful force for innovation and creativity, inspiring artists and thinkers to explore the transformative potential of the moving image. Deleuze's philosophical project gains further clarity through an examination of this concept of difference and repetition, a cornerstone of his challenge to traditional metaphysics. He posits difference as a primary force and ontological condition preceding identity. Repetition, therefore, is something other than a mere duplication of an original. It is the production of difference itself. Traditional thought often conceives of identity as stable and pre-existing, with difference arising as a deviation from this norm. Deleuze, conversely, argues that difference is the generative principle, the engine of becoming, and that what we perceive as identities are, in effect, temporary crystallizations of differential processes. This perspective addresses a significant problem within traditional philosophy, its limitations in accounting for novelty, creativity, and the dynamic nature of existence. Philosophies predicated on fixed essences and stable categories struggle to explain how genuine innovation arises. If everything is ultimately reducible to pre-existing forms, then true originality becomes an impossibility. Deleuze offers a philosophy of difference as a solution one that emphasizes the virtual and the actual. The virtual, for Deleuze, is a realm of potentiality, a reservoir of differences that are constantly in the process of actualizing themselves. Actualization is the process by which these virtual differences become concrete and specific, giving rise to the identities and forms that populate our experience. Deleuze's analysis of the concept of the simulacrum provides a tangible example of this philosophy of difference in action. In Plato's philosophy, the simulacrum is a false copy, a distorted imitation of an original form. Deleuze, however, revalues the simulacrum, arguing that it is something other than a degraded copy. The simulacrum, for Deleuze, possesses its own unique power and reality. It is a copy without an original, a pure appearance that generates its own effects. This is exemplified in contemporary digital culture, where simulations and virtual realities create experiences that are distinct from any pre-existing reality. Consider, for instance, the use of computer-generated imagery in film. These images are not simply copies of real-world objects. They are often entirely new creations, generating their own aesthetic and emotional impact. The simulacrum, in this sense, becomes a site of innovation and creativity, a space where new forms of experience and expression can emerge. Deleuze's concept of the rhizome offers a further dimension to his philosophy of difference, providing a model for understanding complex systems and networks. The rhizome, inspired by the botanical structure of certain plants like grass or ginger, is a non-hierarchical, decentralized network that emphasizes connections and multiplicity. Unlike a tree, which has a single root and a hierarchical structure of branches, the rhizome has multiple entry points and connections, allowing it to grow in any direction. This model challenges traditional notions of organization and structure, offering an alternative to hierarchical systems of power and knowledge. The rhizome has found application across various fields, from computer science to social theory. In computer science, the concept of the rhizome has influenced the design of distributed networks, such as the Internet, which are characterized by their decentralized structure and multiple points of connection. In social theory, the rhizome has been used to understand the dynamics of social movements and resistance, which often operate through decentralized networks and horizontal forms of organization. The Occupy movement, for example, can be understood as a rhizomatic network with multiple nodes of activity and no central leadership. Deleuze's concept of the rhizome also resonates with contemporary discussions of artificial intelligence and neural networks. Neural networks, inspired by the structure of the human brain, are composed of interconnected nodes that process information in a distributed manner. The connections between these nodes are constantly being adjusted and modified, allowing the network to learn and adapt to new information. This model of distributed intelligence aligns with Deleuze's emphasis on multiplicity and connection, offering a powerful framework for understanding the complexities of artificial intelligence. Deleuze's emphasis on difference and multiplicity challenges the traditional philosophical focus on unity and identity. He valued heterogeneity, fluidity, and the constant process of becoming. This perspective has had a profound impact on various fields, from art and literature to social theory and political activism. Deleuze's work encourages us to think beyond fixed categories and to embrace the dynamic and ever-changing nature of reality. Synthesizing Deleuze's key concepts reveals their enduring relevance for understanding contemporary issues. His philosophy of difference provides a powerful framework for analyzing the complexities of identity, culture, and power in a globalized world. His concept of the rhizome offers a model for understanding complex systems and networks, from the internet to social movements. His work on cinema provides insights into the transformative potential of the moving image. Deleuze's legacy extends through his profound influence on subsequent thinkers. His ideas have been taken up and developed by a wide range of scholars, including those working in post-structuralist theory, feminist theory, queer theory, and critical race theory. His emphasis on difference and multiplicity has provided a valuable resource for challenging dominant narratives and power structures. One notable example of Deleuze's influence can be seen in the work of Manuel Delander, a contemporary philosopher known for his work on complexity theory and artificial intelligence. Delander draws on Deleuze's concepts of difference and becoming to develop a non-essentialist account of social and political organization. He argues that societies are self-organizing systems that emerge from the interactions of multiple heterogeneous elements. This perspective challenges traditional notions of top-down control and planning, emphasizing the importance of bottom-up processes and emergent phenomena. Another example of Deleuze's influence can be seen in the work of Rosi Braidotti, a feminist philosopher known for her work on posthumanism. Braidotti draws on Deleuze's concepts of becoming and multiplicity to develop a posthumanist ethics that embraces difference and challenges traditional notions of subjectivity. She argues that the human is no longer a fixed and stable category, but rather a fluid and evolving entity that is constantly being shaped by its interactions with technology and the environment. Deleuze's contribution lies in his rethinking of fundamental philosophical assumptions about being, knowledge, and power. He challenges the traditional emphasis on representation, arguing that thought should be understood as a process of creation and invention. He challenges the traditional emphasis on subjectivity, arguing that the self is not a fixed and stable entity, but rather a fluid and evolving process. He challenges the traditional emphasis on power as a top-down force, arguing that power is distributed throughout the social field and operates through complex networks of relations. In assessing his lasting impact on contemporary thought, it becomes clear that Deleuze's ideas continue to resonate across various fields. His emphasis on difference and multiplicity has provided a valuable resource for challenging dominant narratives and power structures. His concepts of the virtual and the actual offer a powerful framework for understanding the complexities of contemporary culture. His work on cinema provides insights into the transformative potential of the moving image. Deleuze's philosophy remains a vital source of inspiration for artists, thinkers, and activists who seek to create a more just and equitable world.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.